Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm your host, Malachi Greb. Today we have a very experienced guest, and you may already know him in the industry, Chris Elston. He's the founder of Mr. PLC, and he's been doing a ton of things in our industries for over 20 years now. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Malachi. I'm glad to be here and talk to your audience of people. I know you're an up and coming influencer, and it's awesome to talk about some history in our career or our industry basically. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And somebody like you come from a lot of controls experience, a lot of controls background, and that's also where I spent some of my time in my career. And I think it's just you have a ton of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge, and you've done some really cool things throughout your career.
Yeah, I started out as I really didn't know I wanted to be a controls engineer when I first started out. When I was a young boy, like 17, 16 years old, I thought I wanted to be an electrician at the time, so I signed up for a journeyman's program, and I ended up working for a commercial electrician basically, and kind of got my feet wet, pulling wires and stuff, and got into controls. I kind of have a pretty crazy story of how I actually became a controls engineer, but I've been programming PLCs a long time, and I finally I sort of kind of took a liking to robots here in the end of my or the later part of my career. So it's been quite the journey for sure.
Awesome. So let's hear about this transition that you had to go through to become a controls engineer.
Yeah, sure. So like most young people out there, you probably really don't know what your passion is when you're young, and so but I kind of started learning computers on the side. I actually was like in high school, and I got my first 386 8088 computer, and I started tearing it apart for some people at church, and I was a self-taught computer builder, computer person. So I started to be quite savvy with computers, but I also like to do wiring too, I knew, and so I thought I'd try to be an electrician at the time. And I started working for a commercial contractor, and I had the opportunity to build some industrial panels for the first time. So my employer that I worked for, basically, he had an opportunity to build some industrial panels for a company called Hewlett-Packard at the time, and they were elevator panels. And so and he brought some prints down to me. Be mindful that I was 17 years old. I got a packet of prints, and he's like, "Hey, you think you could wire these up?" And I'm like thumbing through these, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not scared of anything at that time. And I told him, yeah, I think I could. And there were some pictures and photos they had taken on some Polaroids at the time. And so I went for it, and I built these panels up, wired them up, and I'm a little bit OCD, so I like to keep the wire labels nice and straight and everything. And about a year later into that, my boss got a call at the time from the company that contracted us. And he said, "Hey, we want to talk to the person who wired these panels up." And, my boss at the time, he said, "Well, it actually was one of our, apprentice people down in the basement. And he's only in high school." And so he came down, and he talked to me, called me up to the office, and he said, "Hey, you remember them panels you built, for that company?" And I was like, "Yeah." I thought I was in trouble, because he's calling me upstairs from the basement. I thought I was in big trouble. But it turned out to be, he said, "Hey, that company has a panel shop, and they want you to come. They want to offer you a job." And that was a pivotal moment in my career, because at that point, my boss at the time, he could have not told me about that opportunity, and I would have probably became a journeyman electrician. But he saw something in me at that time, and he said, "Hey, Chris, you're a really smart kid." He says, "I think this would be a good opportunity for you, and it'd be more of an opportunity than I can give you as a commercial, a journeyman or a company. And I think you should go and interview with them." And so I am forever, in debt to my old boss, and I'm very appreciative of management people that look out for employees like that. it's hard to find today in this industry. So
yeah. I mean, he definitely looked out on the fullest. I mean, a lot of people would be scared to lose their employees. They would have definitely not offered that opportunity up like that.
Right, definitely. So so then I just started learning about PLCs. I started working in the panel shop, and it turns out that company that hired me, they offered tuition reimbursement. So I decided, and they also, they were of course involved, installing PLCs. And my first PLC was a Modicon PLC. So that was quite interesting. And then right after that, Alan Bradley, we were still using PLC 5s back in the day. I remember doing a project for Lucent Technologies, which is a old phone company, and programmed a PLC 5 and old AI, DOS software. I don't know if you're, old enough or young enough to remember that even.
Right.
But we used to have to program Alan Bradley an old DOS software, called AI, basically. Wow. Is what it was called. And then finally, the first version of Windows, RS Logix, came around, and that definitely made it a lot easier to learn. But
that's actually one of my questions. Do you feel like over time, like PLC programming has become easier or harder?
Oh, definitely easier. At first, there wasn't tag-based PLCs. That kind of came about 5 or 10 years later into my career. Like we kind of had the 500 platform, the PLC 5 platform.
Yeah, address-based.
Address-based, and it was a little bit cumbersome. And I thought, when a tag-based processor came out, when I first saw it, I really didn't like it at first, but now I would never go back. I mean, I totally understand, like, how to utilize its power and all of that, and definitely tag-based. When tag-based came around, that was a game changer in the industry, I believe, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what was your next phase in your career? I think you did panel building, which I think is great for any like PLC programmer to get like kind of kicked off in the industry and to like get a good understanding of what you're building before you start to try to program the thing. You actually know what a piece of IO is.
Yeah, I tell you what, I feel like I'm the poster child for getting into this industry, because for sure, if you can get your foot in the door, as a young person, and get into a panel shop and actually build panels first before you become a controls engineer, it's going to make you an excellent electrical designer, because being a controls engineer, you typically have to, learn the componentry, learn how safety circuits work, how to wire things. And by you actually getting into a panel shop and looking at what somebody else has done and looking at those prints and then building it yourself and wiring it, by the time I finished my bachelor's degree, and then I became a controls engineer, and I closed my toolbox for the last time in the panel shop, and I moved into a cubicle. All right. So, and then that following week, back in the day, we were using a piece of software called Via Wiring Diagram. It was actually made in Marion, Indiana here, if you didn't know, which eventually became Autodesk Electrical. So Autodesk bought Via Wiring Diagram, and that was kind of birthed here in Indiana. So
wow, that's really cool.
But before that, there was we used to have to make our own menus in AutoCAD like 2000 or whatever. But anyway, learning how to build wire up panels, just like you said, Malachi, is definitely a great career path. Getting your foot in the door and kind of stepping your way into it, and becoming a pretty good engineer in that way. Because back in the day, back when I was young, they didn't really have what you guys have today as young kids. They offer a lot more classes and a lot more trainers and a lot more hands-on things that are available that we didn't have back then. We had to learn by doing back then if we wanted to get into PLCs.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of more options, especially going into the future. Like you're getting online PLC classes. You have like the Mr. PLC that you founded. All these different resources that were not accessible. Even like in the beginning of my career, I mean, I started like a little over, I think, 10 years ago now, and even then there wasn't near as many resources as there are today.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of almost a black art, to get into it. A lot of people don't really understand what we do on a daily basis. I know, sometimes when you talk to people that have no idea and you try to say, well, I program a PLC, it's kind of it's a interesting topic, a dinner topic if you have someone that doesn't know what the industry is, and to try to explain that to them what you do for work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think another thing is too that I think that something that would be very advantageous for our industry as a whole is when it comes to the training and the experience for somebody to become a PLC programmer. Instead of people coming out of college and immediately becoming a PLC programmer, they should kind of go through more of the steps of doing the panel building, maybe getting involved in a little bit of electrical engineering, and maybe throughout this whole time you're being involved with the PLC, or at least the guy that's programming the PLC. There's some small interaction, maybe apprenticeship there, and really build up over time, because there's so many things that I did. I personally did mechanical, I did electrical, I did pretty much every aspect to building a project. And then whenever as I kind of moved up, I ended up kind of becoming a PLC programmer and then a project manager at the same time. And then so that experience gave me the ability to be able to program much better, because I understood okay, this mechanical arm needs to flip in this way, and whenever we drop this piece of glass, we can only drop it by ½ inch max, or else it's going to shatter the glass. These small physical things that you actually need to have in your mind, when it comes to writing your code, you're not able to write code really well until you understand a lot of these real world things.
Yeah. I think for the next part of my career, as I graduated and I kind of moved into that cubicle per se, is finding, someone that is a good mentor to you. And luckily for me, the company that did have the panel shop did kind of value mentorship a little bit. And I'm going to give kudos to my mentor. His name's Kent Giant. And he was the first one to really sit down with me and kind of explain PLC programming, what ladder logic was. And, some of my early tasks were just commissioning, upgrading firmware, or setting Ethernet, well, it wasn't Ethernet IP back then, but setting IP addresses, or setting, Blue Hose, or it was actually Data Highway Plus node addresses, and those types of things back in the day. But like you said, just kind of taking some baby steps toward that, and then eventually being offered small projects that you could program and start learning on that. But being able to look at what someone else had done, and that's kind of really the premise of Mr. PLC. Is over the years, people have uploaded lots and lots of sample PLC projects on there. And that was really kind of my premise of how I would learn something, especially a new PLC that I'd never programmed before, as I'd go on there and download, a sample that someone had already written, so I could kind of see how to structure it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hardest part. With starting with a new PLC platform, is kind of just identifying, okay, I've done this thing over in Allen Bradley. Now I need to move over to Omron. What does that similar thing look like inside of Omron? And it doesn't get much easier than being able to see code that's already written out for you.
That's right. Yeah. And so that's that's some of the resources that are definitely out there on out on the internet. I know some people think forum boards are kind of old or whatever, but one of the things about forum boards is that they are embedded into the search engines out there. And so today people probably use Discord or something like that to chat, but there's no way to search any of that information that's been discussed or shared or whatever. And so that's why, an old forum board like Mr. PLC or PLCs.net or control.com, those websites, have, when you go out there and you search on Google, you're typically directed to one of those three places for somebody that's experienced that issue that you're having trouble with, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you did, especially for that time, it was a super big undertaking. We talked about this off camera. It wasn't as easy to build a website as it is today. there was a lot more manual labor that went into like structuring the entire system.
Yeah, I mean, at that particular time, it was 1999. I think I was 23 years old at the time, and I kind of knew, I had a passion toward building computers. Like, I'm one of those people that build my own PCs, or I was kind of a PC gamer in my younger years. And I didn't go to school to run a web server, and that was a completely different animal. And back in that time, we would run what was called a LAMP server. So Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, right? That's kind of what that stands for. And so I had to learn Linux, just off the cuff, just by fire, basically. And when I first registered Mr. PLC, I remember my inspiration. I'm kind of a big Excel guy, and there was a website called MrExcel.com. And so that's where I got my inspiration for MrPLC.com. As soon as I thought of it, I registered it right away. And then I ended up signing up for, I remember I signed up for, I think HostGator at the time was like $7 a month or whatever. And, I installed the forum board. I bought the forum board software. It was called Envision at the time. It needed to live on a Linux system with MySQL and PHP. And I figured all this out basically and got it running. And then at that particular time, Rockwell was really big into their forum boards, and I don't know, they just had some political issues on the top end, and Rockwell ended up just closing the forums down. And the timing was just perfect, because here I was trying to start a forum board. Rockwell closed theirs, and like within two weeks, I had almost 20,000 people sign up on Mr. PLC. God. It was insane. Wow. And within 3 weeks, I had to move Mr. PLC to a bigger host. And over the course of my ownership of Mr. PLC, I had to move it 7 times. And finally, I had to put it into a dedicated server. And it was like in a dedicated data center, like out west somewhere. And it was costing me an arm and a leg every month to basically, keep the website running, because there would be, about 1 million to 2 million visits a month on Mr. PLC. And, it just kind of grew, exponentially at that point. Yeah. And it was a struggle to keep running. And over the years, many people had tried to buy Mr. PLC from me, including, Amron and a few others out there. But I just felt like it would be best if it stayed in some ownership that was kind of neutral a little bit. Yeah. But it's definitely kind of a cool story to tell. And I still get embarrassed today, because sometimes I go somewhere and someone will find out that I'm Mr. PLC, and they'll ask me for my autograph, and I get kind of embarrassed. But but now I actually kind of turn the tables on people. And when I go to these trade shows and stuff, on my lanyard, all of these, people like yourself, Malachi, I ask those guys to, hey, can I get your autograph? Because I think you guys are more famous than me.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's definitely a humbling moment. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, getting into PLCs, and then finally, I sort of just started taking a liking to robotics, and which has been it's been a good mesh, because, currently right now working for Yamaha, kind of promoting Yamaha product line and everything. And what I've been able to bring to the table of that is all of the PLC side of my experience, and trying to offer like all of the Yamaha product line, being able to write all the AOIs for all of the Yamaha product. And that's been a pretty good fit for me, and it's also being in the forefront of robotics. Seems like you're kind of out there on the cutting edge of everything in the automation world, coming up and coming for sure. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I kind of caught the robotics bug, and like that's a huge reason why we do so much robotics is like, I don't know, something about having a robotic arm. I mean, custom systems are really cool as well, but like you can do so much with a robotic arm, and with the moving of materials, welding, I mean, anything you can think of, really.
Right. Yeah, there's only so much you can do with pneumatic cylinders or the sound of pneumatics. I used to remember when we didn't have a robot and we built dial tables with pneumatic, pick and places on them, and your machine would have that certain sound like,
Yeah.
and like you could walk into the floor, and it's like, wait a minute, something sounds off. So now you just hear the when you walk into a plant, so
Yeah. I'm actually really curious. Whenever you got that huge inflow of traffic initially, where were you at in like your career? Did people know who you were, or was that just a demand thing?
On Mr. PLC, you're talking about?
Yep.
Or, no, they did. They really didn't know. Tim, you probably know Tim Walburn.
Yep.
He was like, I think he was like user number 2 on Mr. PLC.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
So that's how I met Tim, and a lot of the people that I know, is through Mr. PLC. And I honestly just think I got lucky. I mean, I used to, go on Alan Bradley's forums and like ask questions on there, and but then, like I said, something happened, and they just one day we all went there, and they closed it, and then. And I had gotten a few signups or whatever, or had the website up and running for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when they closed it, like that third week, fourth week of having the website up, that I got like 20,000, people to sign on. And then it just kind of sort of snowballed from there. I just got really, really lucky, I think, with it for sure.
Like whenever you were in the forums, do you feel like your name got known at all, or?
Oh yeah, I've always used my real name. So
Gotcha.
like, yeah, if you go there, you'll see a picture of me and my real name. I've never used like an
alias or something.
An alias or anything like that. And so, my picture's kind of I need to update my picture because it still looks like I'm 20 years old in my photo on Mr. PLC.
Right.
But yeah, over the time, like just meeting different people like that would join Mr. PLC, that was the coolest thing ever. I mean, I've been able to meet really, inspiring people from Mitsubishi, GE, Omron. I remember one time I was trying to do some crazy hydraulic stuff, and I wanted to do some like almost electronic gearing with a hydraulic cylinder. And there was a guy on there that owns a company called RMC, like controllers. His name was Peter Natchaway. The guy's like super brilliant, by the way. Like when he posts on Mr. PLC, it's like above my head, even, like some of the stuff he talks about. But he owns a company and makes a product that if you ever need to control a hydraulic cylinder or multiple hydraulic cylinders or electronically gear hydraulic cylinders together through an Allen Bradley PLC. I mean, some stuff like that I learned over the years, just being able to use my own website. But the funniest thing, this is the funniest thing, is when, I'm struggling with something and maybe I don't know what it would be, and then I go to Google and I start to search, like, well, how do you do this? And then all of a sudden, out pops Mr. PLC, and then I click it and I'm like, oh crap, I asked the same question on Mr. PLC, like, a few years ago. So that's kind of funny sometimes to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that it holds like definitely a huge legacy. And if you think about it, like especially for your time, that the forums were the version of like our YouTube today. Like really,
Right.
like the major difference is like monetization. Like there's probably if there was better monetization for forum stuff, like you'd be multimillionaire, like easily, because of just like all the traffic that was generated. Like that the forum stuff was the exact same thing as like being an influencer or being a host of that is the equivalent of like having a YouTube channel and being a YouTube host.
I think so. Yeah. Over the years, things have changed, but I think you're right. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, of having that opportunity to have that. And like I said, the coolest thing is it's still searchable. All the information is very easily accessible when you go to Google, if you're trying to find something via Google versus trying to find something via, YouTube, let's say. But back then, the only way to monetize was sign up for what was called Google AdSense. And so I remember like when I first, I think like the first 4 years, I didn't really have any ads on Mr. PLC. I didn't want any. I was kind of stubborn. And I remember, I'm like, I'm going to sign up for Google AdSense and see what this is all about. And I stuck one AdSense banner on Mr. PLC. And in the next month, I got an $800 check. I was like, what the heck? I should have done this a long time ago, you know?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it was one of those things that I just had no idea. I mean, I didn't even know, you know, the next thing that happened was a company wanted to advertise on there, and they said, hey, can you send us your media kit? And I'm like, I don't even know what a media kit is, you know, at the time. So I had to go figure that out and try to make one. And so I did start to slowly try to figure out. And honestly, the money that I made on advertising went right to pay for the hosting. It was almost a wash because it was $1,200 to $1,400 a month, you know, to keep that website going. It was a lot of money at you know, back then 20 years ago. For sure.
Yeah. I think also like the cost to maintain a website was like much more expensive. It was much more complicated, and overall, just the entire process was much more difficult than it is today.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think another huge advantage that people have in today's generation is like things like monetization are like quite a bit easier to like educate yourself on, and like the younger generation or just people of the generation now, they have like the ability to access like YouTube videos that, you know, can train them on like, you know, hey, I already have this thing that's very popular. How do I monetize on it? And I think it's going to open up a huge wave of like individuals who are able to become like entrepreneurs, or like even just like small business owners, right? Like sole proprietor type of thing. And like all they do is maybe create stuff like PLC videos, and they can create, they can get enough monetization off of like YouTube ads or other like creative things like doing like Amazon affiliate programs and stuff like that. Like that's like, so many people make more money off like Amazon affiliate programs than they do like YouTube. And you could have like, say for instance, like your Mr. PLC, and then just find something that goes along with that, right? If there like some type of like a data cable that you can sell that's on Amazon, or you know, some type of connector or something.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because I did actually sell PLC cables for a while.
Did you?
I figured out how to make little PLC cables, and ended up selling that business off to the person who owns it now. And I used to compete against him a little bit in that way, because I was one of those people that, I tell you what, there was nothing worse than spending, you know, $200 or $300 on a programming cable for a DH485 adapter, basically is all it was, right? And so I ended up designing my own circuit board and selling PLC cables for a while, and I did sell quite a few cables, but that just became, you know, like you can imagine, I was just sitting in the living room, I'd go to work, and I'm like soldering PLC cables for like, you know, 2 or 3 hours. It's so it's pretty wild, you know, after a little bit.
Yeah, you're probably almost ready to open up a manufacturing facility.
Yeah, I could have. There's so many opportunities for me. Like I said, I was pretty lucky, you know, with the different aspects of, you know, of networking with the right people, having the right mentors, and then just just having the drive to learn, right? I mean, not being lazy about anything, just trying to figure out how the, you know, these things work basically in the industry. So definitely something that, you know, I don't know the younger generation has more of a sit back and relax type of thing, and I'm trying to you know, poke them a little bit. I'm like, hey man, no one's gonna give you a, you know, the silver platter here. You're gonna have to get out there and you know, go be a go-getter, right?
Yeah, that is the one caveat of like, we have all this information, all this ability to learn things, but then it seems like there's a lot of people that would prefer spend their time on like entertainment versus education.
That's right. Yeah. Eventually I'll be back on YouTube somewhere. That's sort of kind of one of my things on my hit list is I want to be like Tim. I want to be like Malachi now. I want to get my own YouTube going.
If we can do anything to help you get there, we'll help you out.
All right. It sounds great.
Yeah. I think you'll do well enough on your own. I think one thing that I think would be like super advantageous is like somebody could just go on to like, you know, Mr. PLC or a similar website and like see the questions that are being asked there, and utilize those as bulletin points or topics to do YouTube videos on.
Right. Yeah.
Whenever go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, some of those are frequently asked questions, like you said, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, so whenever I started our YouTube channel, coming from a PLC background, like that was my game plan for the PLC, or for the YouTube channel, was like to do like PLC tutorials, robot tutorials, like how to set up PLC with a robot. And, we launched a few videos like that and done some tutorial videos of like some products on like an engineering controls engineer level. And like the thing I found is like, this is hard. Like this consumes a lot of time, and especially like maybe it's something that like maybe you haven't done it for a long time. So now you got to go look and like, how do you do that thing again? Or because when you're shooting the video too, like you're trying to train people and you get to a point and you're like trying to click a button. You're like, oh, I can't find that button. It's been like, 6 months since I did this operation before.
Right. Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. It's not easy to make like those, teaching videos or whatever, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the things that like Tim and whatnot, they're doing, that like definitely kudos to them, because they're putting in effort into it. And also too, like a thing that I kind of hate is I'm definitely, as operating a company, I'm like getting more and more away from like controls work. And so kind of, I'm not gonna say I'm like losing that skill set, but I'm just like not in it every day doing it. And so it's like,
yeah, that definitely is a hard transition. I remember I remember one of your interview questions, that I answered was, what's one of the things that I regret, and one of the things I regret is turning down management 9 times in my career, and that's because I really like to code. I did not want to do like the management aspect of like, this field or whatever. And, but I feel like so far I've been able to still do some technical aspect of what I want to do, but yet be sort of a leader or maybe inspire or give some guidance, if you will. Like this is kind of, a vision, if you will, kind of try to be like a visionary person, but still have some technical, hold of like what, the reins, if you will, of like where we're going to go, as far as different things, especially on the Yamaha side, for sure. So, but yeah, it's hard to, be a person in your space, for sure. Like, because I think you're kind of still young, and you're you're trying to grow a company, and then you're still very technical, but yet you still have to be that visionary, that leader for all of the people that you lead in your position, so that's a tall order, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, as of right now, like the biggest things is like it really is like the experience side of things. Visionary, I'm 101% a visionary. I'm like, give me some money and I'll show you what I can do with it.
That's right.
And then like there's other aspects like going into experience is like making money, right? So like if you have like, I have a lot of ideas, but like also like with the ideas that you have to find a way for monetization. Like how do you make money off of whatever this idea is?
Right.
For a perfect example is this podcast, right? The manufacturing come up. It and to some degree doesn't 100% align with like what we sell, what our service is, right? Like we're not educating engineers per se. We're educating the young engineer who's just now getting into the industry. And at most, I mean, not necessarily at most, but the most probable thing is that people may want to reach out to come work for us. Hey, I've seen this video, educating on careers, blah, blah, blah. Do you have a job openings? But like, so like, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, I think that's the hardest thing in today, like in 2023, is a lot of the young people out there, they just don't know anything about what we do, Malachi. Like, because when you think about a high schooler or someone in college, they don't have an insight into manufacturing at all, or engineering for that matter. And so, and that's one of the things for me, like, I mentor FIRST Robotics. I've been a FIRST Robotics coach for 19 years, and I network with all the sponsors and everything around. We've got lots of teams and lots of sponsors in the state of Indiana. And but that's like the number one thing I see is like, most kids that go to high school today, they probably understand like, what their parents do, maybe they're accounting or doctor or whatever, but you'll find that if you ask most kids, they don't have any clue what manufacturing is, a PLC, a robot. And so we've got to figure out more ways of how to expose the young people into what we do, because as you probably know, being a business owner, it's probably really difficult to find new employees. And the reason for that, I believe, is because the kids just don't know about what we do,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a small pool. Like I think in our immediate area, we probably only have like, let's say like definitely under 100. We probably only have like max 100 people graduating in a year that are even like remotely close to our industry or field.
Right. So, manufacturing come up, is one of those ways that, we can spread the message about our industry and how to get involved in what we do. And I always tell the kids, man, what we do is very lucrative,
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah,
it's definitely money to be made.
I think this is definitely a great career path to be in. Like one thing I'm definitely like kind of promoting more than I've ever have is like the sales side of our industry, because sales, I realize that that's where you make the most money, right? Being a controls engineer is awesome. It definitely has its challenges and, its headaches on a daily basis. I loved it and I still do love it. Still kind of wish I could do it on a daily basis. But like sales, like that opens up a huge opportunity. For people to make really good money, right? Like it's kind of limitless, right? Like it's highly likely that sales individuals who work for our company in the future may make $1 million a year. I mean, I'm not to putting a cap on anybody's amount that they can make if they can provide that much value.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially, distribution channels and stuff like that, like an outside salesperson, if you like doing something different every day, and or driving around or traveling or whatever, those are definitely industries that are fun to learn about, because you're always learning about new stuff. I mean, that's definitely the one thing I would not ever change the career that I've picked, because every day to me is a new day, and every day I'm learning something new. And I've never been bored as a controls engineer. Never.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's definitely one of my top favorite things about this industry is always being able to experience probably two things: experiencing new things, going to new manufacturing facilities, new products, being able to just see like even the things that we're not necessarily touching, but just seeing how like things are built. Being able to go into like Toyota facilities and just seeing how they're constructing the car from scratch to a completed vehicle, or just or another thing that's really cool is like that's one of my top things is just seeing products that you use on a daily basis or you see out in the real world and you say, hey, I touched that product that you're using.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, I always joke to people that I've seen everything from diapers to dog food being made. And it's really, what's mind blowing to me is just the quantities of things. Like it just, when you start to go into some of these facilities, I remember doing a conveyor line for Chrysler down in Huntsville, Alabama, and they produced about 1,500 radios a day there. And it's like, well, there's only one radio in a car, and that's just Chrysler, it's just crazy how many, how much, how things are consumed, right? Like, just everything that we touch, our clothes, our shoes, with food we eat, like there's some place that has to make that item or product for us. It's just really wild to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like honestly, like even like this past year, that's been something that's like opened my mind up, especially as like a business owner. I'm thinking about things in like a different way of like, holy cow, like there's enough consumption of whatever this product is that it affords like this massive facility. You're going on site and you're like thinking about some small thing, like you said, like diapers, right? Like, okay, how big could a diaper facility be? And you go in there and you see line after line after line of just making diapers all day. And you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it's starting to see like the relationship of like how much is really going on in the industry and how much we actually consume things.
I know, it's crazy to see that side of it for sure. So
What are some what are some valuable points you have for the audience?
You know, definitely I'd mentioned, you know, early on about finding a mentor. I mean, that's kind of pretty standard in anything that you do, but you know, finding someone that you can confide in and trust in and give you some career advice, or maybe that technical mentor that can teach you something about PLCs. And then for sure, you know, if you're a young person, you definitely want to network with the right people, you know. um, and and that's one of the advantages of being, you know, like, you know, I mentioned that I'm a coach on a FIRST Robotics team. Those high school kids, you know, they get to talk to us engineers every day and network with us and our companies, and in turn, you know, when it comes time for them to apply for an internship opportunity, all of the sponsors on my robotics team offers, they, you know, those kids get first dibs to those sponsorships. And so they get a trial period of whether or not they really like to work for that company or not work for that company. But definitely you want to figure out a way to get yourself networked somehow, you know, whether it be through, you know, a robotics program when you're young, either like Lego League or Vex Robotics or FIRST Robotics or anything of that nature when you're up and coming, you know, as a youngster. And then when you're in college, you know, and you decide, you know, where you want to go and what you want to do in that regard, you definitely want to find those internship opportunities and kind of shop around a little bit, you know, do an internship here, do an internship there. But trying to figure out what you want to do early on is definitely helpful too, because then it can kind of guide you into that direction of finding those right people in that way. So those are some things that are good nuggets of information I think I could pass on to someone younger than me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, even still today, like the networking thing is something that I'm working on, and I wish I would have put more energy into in my career. You said something earlier that kind of like relates to me is, you know, you as the control panel guy or whatever, you're in the basement, and I, you know, I always refer to myself as I was the engineer in the basement, right? So like,
Yeah.
for the most part, I handled like internal workings of the company, but like as far as like, so I was basically working with, you know, maybe the same 13 people, 15 people or something like that on a pretty regular basis. And outside of that, like, you know, I'd meet with customers occasionally, but it would be like maybe once every 6 months because we were doing like capital projects. So there wasn't really a need to like, there wasn't a ton of on-site work. Maybe we do an on-site install for 2 weeks or a month, or maybe there's like some small programming changes you need to go out on site for, or maybe it's just a programming gig. But the interaction level was pretty small. And even things like the programming gig, if you think about it like that, like, okay, you go out there, you say, hi, I'm Malachi here, you know, and then you sit there and you do this all day, you
Right.
know? and so you're not, and they come check on you like twice a day or something like that, see how you're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, like definitely the networking aspect is huge. I wish I would have put more energy and effort into it. It's probably been one of the hardest things that we've had to deal with as a company, right? Because I started, not only like did I already have like a small group of contact lists, but a lot of those people I could not really utilize for business because of like a non-compete, because I also came from a systems integrator. So
Right.
now I'm also not able, the people that I did interact with were customers. And then now I non-compete, I can't go to them. And so at most I can ask them for like references, or, hey, do you know somebody at another company that I could potentially, you know, do work for? So there's like a lot more bootstrapping that was involved that may not have had to have been done.
Right. Sure. Definitely. Yeah. It's a little different animal being a, you know, a CEO like yourself, trying to run a company, you know, versus being like kind of an employee, you know, trying to find your way through the industry. It's a whole different animal, that's for sure, you know.
Yeah, it is. And I just think it's valuable, like the networking side of things, like somebody who's looking for a job, like your job opportunity may come from something completely unexpected, somebody you met during some event or during some just engagement, and so like just being involved and doing those things, like that's been hugely insightful, and I think it's hugely valuable to like people becoming like very successful in their career.
Right. Yeah. LinkedIn definitely has been a little bit of a game changer for, I think, both of us. I mean, been able to kind of self-promote ourselves and, kind of what we do and our message and different things. And it's opened up the opportunity to kind of help network with different individuals or like meet new people, at events like like at a trade show or something like that. And so it's definitely been quite interesting, to kind of be on that LinkedIn wave, if you will, of trying to network with people that way, for sure.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like it is like the only, and it's the number one platform to speak professionally, right? Like to talk about your career and to be okay, and people want to. They're there on that platform for those things.
Right. Yeah. They're trying to learn, for what's out there, what's new or whatever. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like prior to that, it's like you had Facebook and Instagrams and stuff like that, and like most of the time when people are on those platforms, they're there for entertainment or some drama or just something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Chris, do you have any last valuable points you'd like to give to the community before we go?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess, just I always excuse me a second. I think the biggest thing is just to always, put your best foot forward, definitely, for sure, and not sit back. And that's sort of the downfall that I see with some of the young people today is I think they just take that sit back approach. We kind of talked about that earlier in the podcast. And no one's going to come by and give you an opportunity, right? You have got to have the drive yourself to get out there and figure out what it is that you want to do, what kind of career you want. If you really want that job, you need to be very proactive in trying to figure out how to get your foot in the door in some manner or way of that nature. So if you're one of the young people out there that are interested in what both me and Malachi do in this industry, you got to get out there and put yourself out there and figure out how to get what you want, for sure.
Yep. Be creative. Chris, where can people find you at?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Elston on LinkedIn, or they can go to mrplc.com and find me, or yrginc.com, where I work currently, as far as on there. But I think most people know me as Mr. PLC. Tim refers to me as the OG, the original gangster of Mr. PLC. So you can find me there for sure. You can send me a direct message, super user number 1.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. We enjoyed having you today.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I like talking about stuff like this, and I appreciate what you do. And definitely you're an inspiration to the community, and keep talking to the young people, keep getting more people involved. And I look forward to seeing you and your company and Jenna at more trade shows here in the future, Malachi.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. See ya.